make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, I'm talking about my girl. Hold on, you really gotta hold on me. You really gotta hold on me. You really gotta hold on me. My sugar pie, honey bun. You know that I love you. I do. Oh, I can't help myself. I love you and nobody else. Work, oh, work it out, baby. Work, while you driving me crazy. Work, just a little bit, so now work. Well, I heard it through the grapevine. I heard it through the grapevine. How much longer will you be mine? How much longer will you be mine? You know that I heard it through the grapevine. I heard it through the grapevine. And I'm just about to lose my mind. Oh, lose my mind. 'Cause it's like a heat wave burning in my heart. Can't keep it from crying. It's tearing me apart. 'Cause you're all I need to get by. People moving out, people moving in. Why? Because of the color of the skin. Run, 'cause you sure can't hide. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Vote for me and I'll set you free. Rap on, brother, come on, rap on. With your ABC, it's easy as 1, 2, 3. So simple as do, re, mi, ABC. 1, 2, 3, baby, you and me. Girl, beep, beep, yeah, come on. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Yeah, boy. Yeah, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Here I am, baby. Oh, science got the little jiggy hands. Ooh, oh, here I am, baby. Oh, science got my little jiggy hands. I said a lot of foolish things that I really didn't mean. Oh, baby. 1, 2, twice. Da 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 da. Ooh, baby love, my baby love. I need you. Oh, how I need you. I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, I'm talking about my girl, my girl. You really gotta hold on me. 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 My sugar pie, honey bun. You know that I love you. I do. Oh, I can't help myself. I love you and nobody else. Work, oh, work it out, baby. Work, while you driving me crazy. Work, just a little bit, so now work. Well, I heard it through the grapevine. I heard it through the grapevine. How much longer will you be mine? How much longer will you be mine? You know that I heard it through the grapevine. I heard it through the grapevine. And I'm just about to lose my mind. Oh, lose my mind. 'Cause it's like a heat wave burning in my heart. Can't keep it from crying. It's tearing me apart. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Vote for me and I'll set you free. Rap on, brother. Come on, rap on with your ABC. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. So simple as do, re, mi, ABC. 1, 2, 3, baby, you and me. Whoa. Beep, beep, ain't got that. Yeah. Come on. What is it good beep, for? Absolutely nothing. Yeah. Whoa. Beep, beep, ain't got that. Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Here I am, baby. Oh, science got religion in your hands. Ooh, here I am, baby. Oh, science got religion in your hands. I said a lot of foolish things that I really didn't mean. Oh, baby, baby. 1, 2, twice, 3 times a lady, and I love you. Your eyes, they tell me how much you care. Oh, and yeah, you will always be my endless love. To the beat of the rhythm of the night, dancing to the morning light. Forget about the worries of your mind. You can leave it all behind. To the beat of the rhythm of the night, the rhythm of the night.
As we are coming to the close of our Motown medley, we couldn't help but pay homage to some of our influences, who without a doubt have been inspired by Motown. It's undeniable that we should be together. It's unbelievable how I used to say that I'd fall never.
The businesses need to know you don't know just how I feel. Then let me show you now that I'm for real. If all things in time will reveal. How do I say goodbye to what we had? The good times that made us laugh outweigh the bad. I thought we'd get to see forever, but forever's gone away. It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday.
Wanda. Remember this march, you know that, Tawaza?
Sorry, Carl. My computer, of course.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that march when we did that. It was a good march, Robert Hood. 360 billion dudes wins. That's our money. We should keep fighting for it.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree, Carl. So, hey everybody, thanks for being here. We're gonna start in exactly 1 minute. I was trying to give leaders enough time to hop on. We have a guest here from Democratic Socialists of America, Gabriel, who's going to do who's going to do our sort of like Invest in New York training piece. But we have a few items before that, Gabriel. Just wanted to let you know that. So I'm going to screen share now and begin the meeting. Actually, no. I didn't know they're gonna play that Motown song. I mean the Boyz II Men song about like people dying. That was not the tone I was trying to set. Y'all all came in after the great Motown hits that they sang. So, you know, if I got you sad, I deeply, deeply apologize. All right. So welcome everybody to our second Tax the Rich training, so that we can end homelessness, end overdose, you know, and really focus on funding the kinds of initiatives that our state needs to improve the lives and the conditions of people that are living with HIV, who have experienced homelessness, who are formerly incarcerated, and who are active and former drug users. You know, that we want to make sure at Vocal that we are articulating the call to tax the rich, which is a big fight right now across New York State, and it will continue to grow, that we're able to talk about that in the context of our issues so that our issues are not left out of the conversation. And believe me when I tell you, we absolutely have to do that work. Every single leader in this space right now, we're gonna need you to be able to articulate why we need to tax the rich on your issues. So some goals for this meeting. Is there anybody that would wanna come off of mute and read the goals for the meeting?
I can do it.
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So the goals for this meeting are to get leaders and staff fired up for our tax fight, get leaders and staff connected with their demands and needed revenue, and then get leaders and staff initial understanding of the tax policies.
Thank you so much, Biz. That's exactly what we need to have happen here. We need to make sure that this is not just a fight for vocal leaders, right? This is not just a fight about, you know, leaders running campaigns. This is about all of us, because really at the end of the day, taxing the rich to improve the conditions of all New Yorkers is everybody's fight. And that means staff and leadership have to equally understand what's at stake. We have a $15 billion deficit, and I guarantee you when they fill that deficit, we got to make sure that they're doing so in a way that improves our lives. So this training is about that. This is about us in improving our lives, point blank period. And really trying to make sure that our demands are crystal clear and connected to these tax policies, that not just for Vocal, not just for Vocal members, not just for Vocal's allies, but for all New Yorkers that are hearing about this call to tax the rich. Whenever they hear tax the rich, I want them to think, yes, tax the rich, because that's how we're going to end homelessness. Yes, tax the rich, because that's how we're going to expand healthcare services for people that are struggling with chaotic drug use, or people that are struggling with addiction. That's what this goal, that's what the whole point of this training is. And I thank you for getting on here again, because sometimes it takes more than one time for us to really understand something. And I put some pictures in this slideshow to really, you know, shout out to just such beautiful work that folks have done. That picture that's here on the screen is Tatiana, our former civil rights union organizer, who is now working with Robari Bridgeport's office. And that's like flowers. There's a lot of the women that went up to a women's prison in upstate New York to protest the conditions inside of prisons and jails across our state, where women are being left out of the conversation, you know, so just really good moments. So our agenda today is do a quick welcome and review. We're gonna do a quick talk back about our history of Vocal fighting to tax the rich. Some introductions. We're going to hear from Gabriel from DSA about the Invest in Our New York 6 policies. Then we're going to do a little exercise, which is different from the last training. We kind of talked about it, but I'm really interested, and I hope Gabriel can stay to hear this, because I would really like to hear his opinion. But I want to hear leaders talk about taxing the rich from the perspective of your issue, or from the perspective of your town, your union, or your chapter. And then we're going to talk about some next steps for our really important week of action that we're holding next week. So with that, I want everybody that's on here to be kind of quick and brief, but I want to hear your name, your pronouns, the chapter and union, or the chapter or union that you're a part of, and answer this one question. What's one thing that Vocal is fighting for that we need to tax the rich to fund? So I'll present first. My name is Jawanza James Williams. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the director of organizing at Vocal. And one thing that Vocal is fighting for that we need to tax the rich to fund, which really is most of the stuff we're fighting for, I would say is, the housing voucher access program, which would create a housing voucher program for people all across the state who are housing insecure. It costs a lot of money. So we got to tax the rich to do that. So I'm actually going to go down the list and call on people. That way we can make this go smoothly. So let's first hear from, let's hear first from Annette. Annette, are you there?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Annette Tomlin. I'm with the PLU, she, her, and me. I'm fighting for homelessness because I think that that's one of the main things that actually affect everything at the end of the day.
Thank you so much, Annette. I appreciate you. Let's hear from Bobby from Buffalo, New York.
Hi, excuse me. Let me see if I can put everything on. I was trying to start video. I'm new to Zoom.
There you go. It's on
Did
now.
it work? Is
Yes.
it on?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if you guys can see. I can't see you guys. This is Bobby from Buffalo, New York. Pronoun is she, her. I am about a year and a half in Vocal, and I'm trying to learn a lot of the agendas that are profoundly impacting all of the community members that I am around, people who I listen to, whether it be on the bus and travels. As far as tax the rich for the homeless, I personally have an agenda where I was going through a personal issue with
Bobby,
my landlord.
I don't want to cut you off, but we want to get to everybody. So we want to save some of those details for later.
Yes.
There's one thing you want to fight
Yes.
for that
Okay.
you know we can tax the rich and solve. Homelessness is your naming it. It's an issue in Buffalo too.
I wanted to say homelessness, but also mass incarceration because it's so exponentially diverse with how they give sentences for minorities. So I would put that first.
Right. Thank you so much, Bobby. And you're in a good place, and we are so thankful that you are part of this organization. So let's hear next from let's say Kip.
Thank you.
Are you there, Kip?
Hi. She, her, they. I would say all of it. All of it. It was just finishing a call when I got on about a woman who was talking about, and it's not a privilege. So that was very impactful, our conversation.
Kip, your internet is a little choppy. It might work better if you turn off your camera. Okay, let's circle back to Kip. So let's hear from Luis. Wait, am I the one that's not? Can people still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so let's hear from you, Pedro. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, kings and queens. My name is Pedro Benitez. My pronoun is the king. Chapter, PLU, UU. I'm all the unions. I'm glad that I happen to be the board member that represents our area. What is one thing that Vocal is fighting for that we need to tax the rich? Housing voucher access and HASA lookalike.
Okay, you're talking about, thank you, Pedro. You're talking about the PAVS program, which would just create a HASA-like or increased or enhanced services and housing supports for low-income people living with HIV outside of the 5 boroughs. So that's in Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, Westchester County, and everywhere in between. So thank you, Pedro. Let's hear from Flowers.
Did you call me?
Yes, just let us know your pronoun.
Okay. Everybody calls me Flowers. I'm from Buffalo, New York. Homeless union leader and she, her, them, and you peoples. I'm not pronouns.
Okay.
Oh, and I want to cite this rebate they got. It's on the books, and we've been getting billions a year if we just stop giving them 100% rebate on the stock transfer.
Right. Okay, thank you, Flowers. Let's hear from Carl. Carl, your name, pronouns, chapter, union, and answer the question, what's one thing that Vocal is fighting for that we need to tax the rich to fund?
Hello, everybody. My name is Carl Stubbs, and I'm a civil rights leader in Vocal, New York. And I'm also a part of fundraising, which is Vocal Fundraiser. And I'm attacking the rich because I'm coming on the same place I'm doing now, fighting for Robert Hood taxes. And I've been fighting for it for a long time, and I'm not giving up.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Let's hear from, I know we have the whole Grow team on here, so how about we hear from the whole team, starting with May, Luis, and then we'll try Kip again. May, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me? I have like 2 layers of mask on because I'm in the office, but my name is May, pronouns she, hers. Honestly, I'm echoing what everyone's saying. Tax the rich to really fund a real comprehensive Green New Deal for NYCHA. I don't want RAD. I don't want any compromises. We want real public housing and affordable housing for all.
Perfect, thank you, May. Luis, are you there? I saw you came back into the room.
Hey, yes. Hi, my name is Luis. They, them, theirs pronouns, Grow team. I'd love to see that money go to housing, and I'd also love to see it go to funding all kinds of education, including higher education for everyone in the city. We have more than enough.
Okay, wow, thank you for being here, Luis. And do we want to go back to Kip? Kip, did your internet connection improve? Okay, well, let's actually hear from the
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. So yes, Kip from the Bronx, she, her, they. I would say all of it, every single bit of it. It's all connected, and looking forward to having us, make those connections like we're doing. Just real quickly, I was on a call as I got on the meeting, speaking to a person who just needs housing, and it's a right. It's not a privilege. So all of it.
Thank you so much, Kip, and thank you for the work that you're doing with Vocal. Let's actually hear from the Grow team director, Fred.
Yeah, I'm trying to help Malik with his computer, but yeah, I want to tax the rich to end the overdose crisis. It's the issue that really gets.
Thank you, Fred. Actually, while Malik's there, Malik, you want to introduce yourself, name, pronouns, who you are, connected to Vocal, and one thing Vocal's fighting for that we need to tax the rich to fund?
Can't hear you. Could you say it again?
Oh, what's your name, Malik? Your pronouns, how you're connected to Vocal, and one thing that we're fighting for that we need to tax the rich to fund.
Introduce yourself, boy.
Okay.
My name is Malik.
And I want to tax the rich for a lot of things, but mainly the homeless. Can't do nothing unless you have adequate shelter.
I'm hearing a lot of power around this homelessness piece. A lot of people have a lot of strong opinions about that. So let's wrap up with, let's hear from Shirley.
Okay, hello. You know, Larry joins on this call too. Larry Riley, he's here with me.
Okay,
just
both
to
of you.
let you know. Yes, so
Okay.
my name is Shirley. I'm she and her. I'm with Rochester, New York Vocal, and I'm here to fight the rich and the corporations to tax them so that it's fair across the board. It has never been fair. Also, the fact that there's so many homeless people, it's very hard to find a good affordable housing that's safe in our communities. Everybody doesn't want to live in a high rise. So I'm here for the fight and been fighting for homelessness and housing, fair housing for a very long time.
Perfect. So let's, sorry, sorry, go ahead, sir.
You want Larry to speak now?
Yeah, Larry, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Larry. I'm just here to observe how this Vocal stuff working out, how it's working. I'm just an observer.
Perfect. You're welcome in this space, Larry. Thank you for being here. Let's, before we hear from the rest of staff, let's actually shift and go back to some returning staff. I don't know if she's listening directly, but Tatiana Nobles, who used to work at Vocal some years ago.
Tatiana.
Tatiana, are you there?
I am here. Hi.
Did you want to introduce yourself, say a little bit about yourself and what you're going to be doing at Vocal later?
Welcome back.
Sure. I my name's Tatiana. I returned as a data and development manager at Vocal, so helping us do a lot of the work on the back end with our data. And one thing I agree a lot with, like the housing and homelessness that folks have been saying to use when we tax.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Tatiana is a rock star data manager, and it's going to really improve the conditions of our work. So I'm very, very excited. So let's hear from Biz, Luke, and then we're going to hear from our newest employee and worker here at Vocal, Stanley. So Luke, then Biz. Are they there? Okay, well, actually, then let's hear from Stanley. Are you there, Stanley?
Yes, I am. Hi, my name is Stanley Martin. I am the new parole and re-entry coordinator here at Vocal. I'm so excited to be a part of the fam. And when I think of taxing the rich, I think of mass incarceration and re-entry and how we can tax the rich in order to provide services for people coming out of jails and prisons. Thank you.
I'm very excited about Stanley because, you know, Stanley's joining from our Western New York family. And, you know, it's expanding and it's just becoming so powerful. And it just means so much for, you know, vulnerable communities across New York State, because so often that the oligarchs of our state have used this upstate downstate divide to divide working and poor and low income people or no income people from joining together. And we saw how when we unite as a whole state, how powerful that can be. And we saw that with the Housing Justice for All campaigns in 2019, when we transformed the landscape of tenant rights across New York State. Now let's do that for homelessness as well. Thank you so much, Stanley. Super excited to be working with you. I see we were just joined by, I wanna say Kevin or Kelvin. Are you, oh, hey, Kevin, we are introducing our, both of them are joining. Kevin, we're
both on another meeting. So we just got done. So I'm Kevin Aiken, Vocal leader, Rochester, New York.
And
he, him, his.
Did you want to answer this question? What's one thing that Vocal's fighting for that we can tax the rich to fund?
Homelessness. That's always my biggest.
Hey, you're joining a beautiful chorus with that call. So I'm happy and happy as hell to hear it. So thank you, Kevin. Let's hear from Kelvin. Are you there, Kelvin? Are you still connecting?
I am. I'm here.
Oh, perfect. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I apologize. I'm running late, Kelvin. Vocal New York leader, Rochester, New York, member of the Homeless Union. And the question being asked, is that what I'm doing? I'm asking the question?
Yes. You want to,
the question?
Yeah.
One thing that Vocal is fighting for that we need to tax the rich to fund. Wow. Oh man, I mean, what about daycare? I mean, daycare for kids, you know, of people who are trying to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. I think that's relevant to what we work on, because, you know, in 2019, 1 in 10 students in New York City went to school from a shelter. That was 100,000 students. And that story is not unique to New York City. It's unique to Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany, Westchester County. These are real problems. And like the collateral consequences of housing insecurity and homelessness impacts everyone in many ways that ultimately connects to what you're bringing up, Kelvin. So thank you for that. And I think that might be every leader that I want to hear from. So let's actually give Gabriel Gabriel, we'll let you introduce yourself when it's time for you to start presenting. And you know, we are gonna call Biz Berthy, our Drug Users Union organizer, and we have Luke Grandis, one of our other statewide organizers, who is also with us. So I'm gonna move us forward. Actually, did I skip? Oh yeah, let's go ahead, Gabriel. The floor is yours. Do you need me to,
Oh, is it my turn?
Yeah, actually,
I can share my screen if that's okay with you, Juwanza.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I will do that. Just give me 1 second while I manage this technology here. Can everyone see the Invest in Our New York thing? Yes, cool. So hello, everyone. My name is Gabe Eggsy. Thanks so much for having me, by the way. I've never been to a Vocal meeting. Juwanza, thanks so much for the invite. This is really cool to see everyone in here what people are fighting for, which I think are extremely just causes. If you didn't realize, one of the themes that came across everybody's talking point was that this is going to cost money to do all these great things, right? So I'm here on behalf of, I'm with the DSA's Debt and Finance Working Group. I actually work in the financial sector professionally, but I spend a lot of time working with DSA and have helped put together this program of essentially how we can tax the rich in the right way. So to get the money that we need to fund things that we deserve. And mine in particular, I would love to see green and affordable public housing, because I think it could solve so many problems that are facing us at the same time, from homelessness, to people that do have homes but can barely afford them, to people that might have an apartment that can barely afford it. Green public housing can get so much of that covered. So that's my personal one. But over the next few slides, I'll just talk about what we have planned to get us there. So you might hear a couple different campaign slogans. One is tax the rich. The other one, though, is invest in our New York. It's called a plan to tax the rich and fund our future. There's a whole bunch of great coalitions behind, groups behind this coalition, from Vocal to Make the Road, not just DSA, but also Working Families Party, a bunch of really great people that are interested in building a New York that's just, fair, and looks better on the other end of this crisis than the way that we looked going into it. And sorry, managing technology here again. So, kind of a little bit of background before we get into the details. If everyone's probably, unfortunately, very aware, New York faces a social and economic catastrophe right now. Just to put it into perspective with some numbers, New York's death rate from the coronavirus is the second highest in the nation right now. Its unemployment rate is the 5th highest in the nation. So, New York was already, there were plenty of things wrong with New York State going into the crisis. All of them were magnified by the pandemic. And those numbers just give you an idea of how tough it really is right now. And we know for a fact, too, that those big averages don't even do enough justice to really how uniquely hard this past year has been on Black, brown, and low income New Yorkers in particular, right? Like the unemployment rate for the country might be 6%, but for Black and brown workers, that number is as high as 10, 11%, twice as much almost. And so, we need to think holistically about how do we not just get through this crisis, but how do we, as is commonly said, build back better so that, when the next crisis hits, people are not so vulnerable to something like this. Again, just some background on why are we trying to tax the rich right now and how do we get it done? So because of the crisis over the past year, New York State budget has a massive shortfall. The state needs money that it doesn't have right now. The Cuomo in particular is estimating that over the next 4 years, we're down about $50 billion that we need to get. In just 2021 alone, that's about $12 billion. Now, Cuomo and unfortunately Democratic leadership in New York State is usually always quick to say, whoa, let's not raise taxes, let's not get new revenue, let's not tax the rich. Instead, let's just cut the budget to balance it, all right? And we know who that falls hardest on. It falls hardest historically, actually falls hardest on women, African-American workers, and generally speaking, low-income people. Now, the whole idea behind this Invest in Our New York campaign, Tax the Rich, is to say, look, there's a better way forward. We don't need to engage in these cuts. It's bad policy, it's bad for humans, and it also doesn't make any sense because we're a massive and wealthy state with a ton of money that doesn't need to go to budget cuts to fund the budget. So we're fighting back, basically, and we're saying, without immediate action, the action that we have planned in this program, millions more are going to face evictions. Homelessness already on the rise will be even worse. Food insecurity already on the rise, even worse. Public schools are on the front line of these budget cuts always whenever a recession hits. We're talking about a New York that's on the brink right now, and we really can't afford more budget cuts to make it worse. Cuomo's been avoiding this situation of taxing the rich for about 9-10 months now, really almost a whole year. And so we're pushing back. Like I said, I kind of hinted before, I don't think people really realize just how large and wealthy and unique a place New York State is, not just relative to the other 50 states, but really relative to some of the richest states in the world. That's how rich we're talking here. Given that, We have plenty of money here to fund the future that we deserve. We just need to actually, build the political will to do so by taxing the rich. To put into perspective again how big New York State's economy is, in 2019, before the pandemic hit, our economy was $1.9 trillion, not million, not billion, $1 trillion. So what that means is if you took New York out of the United States and pretended it was its own country, it would be the 10th largest economy in the world. That's larger than Canada, that's larger than Australia, that's larger than a bunch of other really large, really wealthy places in the world. So when you hear politicians talking about, oh, well, like we can't do this because look at that state right there. That state is not taxing the rich. We can't do that. We shouldn't be thinking about ourselves in terms of some of these other 49 states. We should be looking at what are other large wealthy countries doing and and asking ourselves why aren't we doing that? So now let me just I basically said we have a really large, really wealthy economy. Next logical question is, well, does our budget, are we raising enough money that a large wealthy economy should and could raise? And what this graph tells us is basically no. So just focus on the very, very far right bar here for New York. Everyone on this graph is a large, wealthy country, ones that we should be comparing ourselves to. And the size of your bar basically says how much taxes is this country raising. We're raising less in taxes than basically any other rich country that's comparable in size and wealth. And what our bill is basically saying is take a look specifically at Canada. We're larger, we're wealthier, we're actually culturally pretty similar, we're neighbors after all. Let's get to the same amount of taxes that they're taxing. And that's what our budget should look like. It's actually not a radical idea. There's other countries that tax even more than Canada, but we're saying, okay, fine, let's look at Canada. They're similar, we can do that. So what happens if we get from our level of taxes to Canada's level of taxes, just in New York State? We're talking about a ton of money. It might look like a little bit of difference getting from our bar of New York, 26% to their bar, or 30% of the economy in taxes. But what that comes out to is actually $70 billion of new permanent revenue every single year coming into the state budget to fund things like everyone talked about on this call already. Affordable public housing, ending homelessness, getting vouchers for those who need it to get into affordable housing. Just to put in the $70 billion into perspective, like I said before, the New York is facing about a $12 billion shortfall in the budget this year. $70 billion is enough to close the $12 billion budget deficit and still have 50 something billion dollars left over to fund all these programs. That's just how much money it is. And we can do it, and it's not bad for the economy. Other countries like ours are already doing it. And that's a simple argument that we're putting forward. So just a really quick history lesson, if we have this rich, wealthy society, where the hell is all the money? Why doesn't our budget look like the budget of other rich, wealthy places in the world? And the answer is that money has gone straight up, from low income people to very high income people because of major changes in the economy over the last 40 years. The rich are it's a cliche, but it's true. The rich are getting richer and everyone else is left on their own. So there's two pie charts here. On the left, this is what our New York looked like in the 1950s to 70s. Times weren't perfect, obviously. African Americans were obviously excluded from most of the gains of the economy, but generally speaking, what this is saying is that if you were in the bottom 99% of workers, sorry, let me just check the chat because I see stuff rolling in. If you were in the bottom 99% of workers, you took home about 99.5% of all income. That's generally well distributed. Again, women were excluded, African Americans were excluded. It wasn't perfect, but we were sharing the economic pie better than we are now. What we're doing in New York now is on the right. What you see in that blue part is basically it's saying that the 1%, the top 1% of income earners in New York State are taking home 51% of all income generated. That's a huge, huge shift, right? And what happened at the same time is this: incomes to the top 1% are going up and up and up. Tax rates on the top 1% are going down and down and down and down. So what happens if you're the New York State government? You're collecting less money in tax revenue. And so when you get a crisis like this, you have a government that doesn't have a budget with the money that it needs, and immediately all the dishonest politicians are like, well, we got to cut the budget. We're putting forward a different argument. We're saying, no, like we have to look at the structural problems here. The rich have been getting away with murder for 50 years and we need to tax them. It's the right way to move forward economically. It's not just morally right, it's economically right. And so that was a quick history lesson. This just puts into perspective how much money the top not just 1%, but the top 0.01% of income earners are making. This shows basically, if you go all the way to the right here, the dark blue line at the top 0.01% saw their annual incomes grow 500% over the last, 40 years, between 1979 and 2017. Now look at the red and gray lines on the bottom. That's the bottom 80% of workers. Bottom 80%, they've barely seen any growth in their income over the last 40 years. And again, what this means is that the government is not taking in tax revenue the way that it should be. And last but not least, we're New York State. We are the global financial capital of the world. We can't talk about tax reform and increasing taxes on the rich without talking about the financial sector. It's also gotten away with murder over the last 50 years, quite literally in some cases. And it also faces no taxes. So in 1970 in New York State, the financial sector was only 8% of all of New York's economy. Today, it's about 20%. The financial sector has tripled over the last 30, 40 years, and it faces no taxes. In other large financial capitals like in Singapore, Hong Kong, London, all of them face these things called financial transactions taxes. We don't have one here. That's part of our program too. We're bringing the financial sector into the tax code. Okay, so it was a quick history lesson. What is the result of all this? The revenue and the taxes that New York State gets are way smaller than they should be. We have a fraction of the budget that we should have. We need common sense tax reform. The top 1% of New Yorkers have the lowest, they pay the lowest in taxes because of these unfair structures of the economy. It shouldn't be that way. It's very straightforward to the rest of us. The more you make annually each year, the more in taxes you should pay. We shouldn't have the system reversed. It's time to fix what we call a regressive tax system. Now is the time to tax the rich. So, it's always frustrating dealing with Democratic leadership in New York State when it comes to raising taxes, but a lot of progress has been made. Last year, Governor Cuomo was absolutely opposed to any increases in taxes on the rich. That's changed. What's happened is that the budget shortfall is so severe and the government is lacking so much money that there's really no choice. And even Cuomo has said, okay, fine, let's look at taxes. Let's be smart about this. We're going to have to tax, I know, but let's not do too much. So what's happening now is, there is growing momentum from the grassroots, from people like Vocal, from people like Make the Road, from people like all these organizations saying, we have to be bold and aggressive to get past this crisis and build back better. It's our job now to make Cuomo realize that it's not the time to be incremental or do small measures and take only a little around the corners here. It's time to be aggressive and put forward a plan that's going to raise a lot of money. And so that's what we're doing. And we're trying to push back on Cuomo and change the conversation that's taking place. And it's working. It's not easy, and it's probably, it's going to take the next couple of months, but it's working. Here's the good news too. We live in a democracy, and it just so happens that 90% of New Yorkers, when asked, should we cut the budget or should we raise taxes on the rich? 90% say we should raise taxes on the rich before we cut the budget. Again, this is common sense to us, but believe it or not, it's not common sense to everyone at the top. Okay. Basic tax reform can save us, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now. We have a plan of 6 bills, like I said, that will raise about $50 to $75 billion annually, probably closer to the 50, to be perfectly honest. But still, it's a lot of money. And they come in 3 big buckets, and I'll go a little bit into each bucket today. One, we're going to want to raise taxes on very high income earners, people making above $300,000 a year. Now, that's really important. If you're making below $300,000 a year in money every year, you will not see any increases in taxes under this agenda that we have. People making above $300,000 a year, that's only 3%. That's only 3% of all New Yorkers. So it's a very small portion of the of the state. We're going to raise taxes on their high incomes. We're also going to tax their wealth. So, you know, sometimes these people that have multi-million-dollar mansions and estates and things like that, they pass it down to their kids. And when it gets passed down, it basically, those kids, even though they've done nothing to, you know, basically work for it or anything like that, they face no tax, which is different than the way other countries do it. We're going to change that and increase taxes on those very, very large inheritances of multi-millions of dollars. And then we're also, I saw some people in the chat here, we're going to tax big business in the financial sector. One is with the financial transactions tax that I talked about before. So, you know, if you buy and sell GameStop, I hope you guys weren't buying and selling GameStop shares, but if you were, the, you know, small stocks buying and selling from, not from individuals, but from big Wall Street institutions, those will be taxed. And we're also going to offset or undo Trump's corporate tax cuts from 2017, which even though Biden is still president, those things are still on the books and we're going to undo them. So first and foremost, you know, pause me at any time too if this gets unclear, but we're going to create what's called a progressive income tax system. It's very, very straightforward. For every extra $100,000 you make in income, you pay a little bit more of a tax rate. You make more money, you pay more money in taxes. It's very simple, very straightforward. It's the only moral way to run a tax system. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that right now. It actually, the way it works out right now is this. Sorry, I don't know why it's showing blue on the screen right now, but what this graph is showing are two lines. The gray line is actually what New York's income tax code looks like right now. So everyone here either has a job now or had a job in the past that has worked and earned a paycheck before, right? On your paycheck, it always lists all the taxes you pay. One of them is the income tax. You pay that back to the state. So it turns out that if you're making above $300,000 a year, up to $1 million a year, you're paying about 6.5% of your paycheck in income taxes to the state. If you're making $50,000 a year, you're paying about 6% in income taxes to the state. There's no reason that someone who's making, you know, $50,000 a year should be paying anywhere near the same tax rate that someone making $1 million a year is. We're going to change that with our program. Our proposal is the blue line. Like I said, the more money you make, a slightly higher tax rate you pay. That's called making a progressive income tax system. So that's bill number one. Now, a lot of people are always like, oh my God, this is, you know, well, not people here, but basically when you get to the press and when you get to Democratic leadership, they'll be like, you know, we're going to crush the economy if we do this. We're really going to scare people away. What this thing shows is that that's just not true. So focus here on this column right here. What this is saying is that if you make, again, like I mentioned, if you make anywhere up to $300,000 a year, you will pay no additional taxes under this plan, zero, okay? Now, if you happen to be making, let's say, $400,000 a year, your only additional tax increase is $650. That's like, you know, they won't even notice that happen if once it's raised, because this money isn't even being spent to begin with. You can't spend that much money in a single year. So it's really a small tax increase that we're talking about, even though it's really, really important to getting the state tax money that we need to spend on these programs. And that's really the main thing here. Even if you're making, let's say, $1.5 million, you only have to chip in $10,000 extra a year. Again, that means you're still walking home with $990,000 a year after you pay your taxes. That's a lot of money. The next one under this taxing high incomes, right? We have to remember that basically rich people actually don't really earn paychecks. That might sound weird, but rich people don't make their money from having a job and earning a paycheck. Most of the really rich people in New York and all across the country, they actually make most of their money by owning a portfolio of stocks, of financial assets, and selling them and making a lot of money on them. That's what they do, right? And so we have to, what that's called is investment income. We need to tax that the same way that we tax people's paychecks. And so that's what our second bill is going to do. Just to put this into perspective, focus on the blue bars here. So the bottom 99%, according to this blue bar, they take home, you basically, if you're in the bottom 99%, you earn about 70-ish% of all of your annual money from your paycheck, which makes sense, right? You have a job, that job provides you with most of your livelihood. You know, a little bit more comes from these other sources, which are Social Security checks, SNAP or EBT payments, things like that. But generally speaking, we work for a paycheck and the paycheck gives us our living. Now look all the way on the right over here for the top 0.01%. That's 1/100th of 1%. We're talking literally like 10,000 people. They don't earn their living from a paycheck. They only earn about a third of their income, 30% of their income from a paycheck. 66% of their money comes from what I said before, stocks. They buy stocks, they sell stocks, and when they sell it at a higher price, they take that money home from them. That gives them about 65% of all their money. That stuff is actually getting a huge tax break right now, and it results in the top 1% paying a lower tax rate than the bottom 99%. Our second bill basically overturns this and taxes them at the appropriate rate. Okay? And so that's the first two bills, trying to basically make the income tax structure more fair so that rich people pay the same rates essentially or higher than people in the bottom 99%. The third one here is the inheritance tax. I know this is a lot of information, so like happy to answer questions now or at the end, or feel free to ask questions whenever. An inheritance tax. Rich person has an estate in upstate New York. Let's say it's worth $10 million. Actually, let's say it's worth $5 million. That rich person dies, and their son or daughter inherited it. No taxes paid on that because of the way that our inheritance tax system works right now. We basically say, look, if you're rich, like you get a big tax break. Like I know that we tax the incomes of the bottom 99%, but your estate is left untaxed. We're undoing that as well. Basically what we're saying is the more expensive your mansion is, if you die and hand it on down, or not just your mansion, but let's say like a huge multi-million-dollar stock portfolio, if you die and hand that down, you have to pay an inheritance tax on that. Your son or daughter will still be very, very, very rich at the end of the day, but some of that money is going to go back to the government to fund the rest of the programs that we need here. And so one of the questions that always comes up that we get to is, I actually live in a gentrified neighborhood. I live in a gentrified neighborhood where I saw my home price go from $500,000 to, $2 million. And I don't have the money to pay an inheritance tax like that. Don't worry. Like this doesn't apply to you. First of all, we exclude all of the houses that suffered from gentrification where that happened. And so that you don't have any liability under this tax. The main theme, if you haven't realized already, is that none of these bills are meant to penalize the working class. None of them are meant to penalize low income. None of them are meant to penalize people that have suffered through gentrification. These are all meant to work on the very richest estates, and that's what this tax will do. Here's like just what the structure will look like, just to put it into context. Let's say that a very rich mom or dad passed on down an estate that was worth $200 million to their son or daughter. They would face a effective tax rate of 49%. That sounds like a lot, but remember, their child, whoever inherits it, will still inherit $101 million, even after that tax is put through. The other half will go into the state's budget to fund the programs that we need. It sounds radical, but plenty of other rich, large countries that I already discussed already do this. I already pretty much covered this. One other thing. So we have this thing called a mark-to-market tax. Basically, it's a wealth tax. Now, when people hear the word wealth tax, they feel like it's a little bit different and weird and foreign, but actually we already have a wealth tax that applies to poor people. It's called the property tax. All right. So if you own a property anywhere, you pay every single year a small tax on the overall amount that your property is worth back to the government. That's a property tax. Now, the thing is, regular people and at low income, middle income, even like some upper middle income, they own most of their wealth in the form of a house. But the really, really, really rich people, they don't own most of their wealth in the form of a house. They own most of their wealth in the form of a stock portfolio, like I mentioned before. That thing is not, that stock portfolio doesn't get taxed like a house gets taxed. We're going to introduce an amendment to the state's constitution to say, look, we need to be able to tax rich people's wealth the same way that we tax poor people's wealth, which is basically via the property tax. And so that's what we'll do. We're not going to actually put in a new tax. We're just going to say the Constitution should allow it to be taxed in the first place. Right now, it's not. Okay, let me go here. Okay, getting near the last two bills here. The fifth out of the six, we're getting into the big business and financial sector right now. So like I said, we live in New York State. It's the global financial capital of the world. Wall Street has absolutely exploded over the last 40 years, and they don't pay any taxes on their financial transactions. Just like, which is very different, like I said before, from places like London, another big financial center, Singapore, Hong Kong, other big financial centers. They all pay what's called the financial transactions tax on all of their trades. So when someone buys or sells a stock, a small, tiny tax of about, literally 0.0005% gets placed on that trade. We're basically going to write one into our tax code just to say, look, like we have a financial sector here. It's important, and it hasn't been paying its fair share in taxes. We need to include this, not just to raise money, but to make things fair. And it raises a lot of money for the government's budget, and so that's one of the other ones that we'll also bring in. And last but not least, so in my opinion, one of the worst pieces of legislation. I mean, there were so many, but one of the worst pieces of legislation that got passed under the Trump administration was the corporate tax cut. So in 2017, in December, I believe, December 2017, Trump basically said to all corporations in the US, right now you're getting taxed at 35% for your corporate profits. We're going to cut that to 21%. The corporations weren't even asking for it. They basically lied to the public and say, once we cut their tax rates, trust me, you're going to see more jobs and more investment, and the economy is going to take off, and boom. None of that actually wound up happening. What did wind up happening, though, is that corporate profits went through the roof. Obviously, if you're taxing them less, they're going to be making more profits. So what we're doing is basically saying, look, that might have been you got away with that at the federal level. You're not going to get away with that at the state level. We have a state corporate tax. Whatever profits you got from that unfair tax reform from Trump, we're going to undo them at the state level. So we'll take that back into the government budget. Now, there's one thing important here to keep in mind. Obviously the Biden administration's in power now, and he's made it a point to say, we're also speaking in terms of Biden also plans to take away not the whole corporate tax cut, but about half of it that was implemented under Trump. So what we've built in is say, okay, whatever Biden takes away, we won't double penalize them. We'll take that away. If Biden undoes some of it, we'll undo some of it here too. So we'll be, communicating with the Biden administration to make sure that we're on the same page, basically. And, overall, it brings in we estimate about $9 billion for the state. So those are the six bills. Like I said, just to recap, about 50 billion, probably closer to 50, not 75, 50 billion-ish dollars a year. It's a ton of money. The word is transformative. Like, we are talking about transforming New York's economy. And, as the Biden, for lack of a better cliche, building back better on the other side of this pandemic once we get out of it. The politics are ripe for it right now. We've probably never had so unified of a coalition across all these progressive organizations, civil society, labor unions, progressive organizations, everybody. We're all on the same board. The greatest thing about these is that the tax reforms are long overdue, and they're relatively easy to understand compared to some of the other ones that have come up in the past. And, last but not least, there's no plan B. We know what the alternative to not increasing taxes on the rich are. It's awful, inhumane budget cuts, that will undoubtedly fall hardest on the most vulnerable here in New York. There's no reason we need to go in that direction. And so, Joanza, I'll give it back to you, but that was the overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Folks first of all, Gabriel, thank you so much. And I see your hand. Oh, wait. So we really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you coming here, because you did a really good job about sort of like briefly describing some of these policies at the earlier this week, I think, Green New Deal training that we did around tax and rich for climate. So first, thank you. There's a lot of questions in the chat, and I do want to uplift something. I probably should have talked to Gabriel about this beforehand, but I think it's important for us to understand how these policies work, because people might try to ask us to trick us up. But at the end of the day, we as leaders who are fighting in homelessness, mass incarceration, AIDS, and the drug war, we don't necessarily have to be tax policy experts. We have folks like Gabriel who understand how to understand economics from a progressive perspective. So we can lean on their expertise, but it's also important for us to have some understanding of how these policies work. But that is a trap too. Like, it's important that we offer you the education to understand the policies, but also you need to understand the sentiment behind the policies, like who the policies target and why they target those folks. So that's really important. So when you're thinking about the questions that you have, keep that in mind. You don't need to be an economics professor to like legitimately call for taxing the rich. So there's a lot of questions in the chat, Gabriel. And I mean, some of them were asked at a point in time when you were on a certain slide, so they may not have exact things. So if the person that I'm going to read each question, and if the person comes on, if it's not clear anymore, you can come and elaborate. So the first question I think we had in here was from Kelvin Johnson. It said, would taxing the rich include closing some of the loopholes that the rich utilize, offshore accounts, etc.? And before you answer, Gabriel, I think this inheritance tax is in this package. So the thing is, I want to back up before you, and I want you to answer, Gabriel, but this training is about Invest in Our New York Act. And that is a bill package with 6 particular tax bills. It doesn't mean that it's the only taxes that need to be addressed or needed to be dealt with, but it's just this package that we're leading with right now at this time as this coalition. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly right. So one, that's a really good question because loopholes are absolutely a major problem. Unfortunately, we don't dive into the loopholes because they can be really complex and super in-depth. And one of the things I said was that the beauty of these 6 bills is that they're relatively easy to understand and high level, right? So like everyone understands the income tax. Like like I said, we've all earned a paycheck at some point, right? We all know what we have to pay that income tax. It's really easy for people to understand that. 1, that's the main way that the government makes its money. And 2, it's super unfair because right now, rich people don't pay that much more in income taxes than poor people, all right? So we're focusing more on the high level stuff rather than the loopholes. But that doesn't mean though that we should, at some point in the future, we should definitely think about the loopholes though, for sure.
Yeah, and thank you, Gabriel. And another thing is that Vocal has worked on campaigns around closing like the carried interest loophole, through our work with, so the same folks that we've worked with for years are also the same folks that are launching this campaign. So folks are aware of these other problems. It's just right now we need to immediately, deal with this deficit and other economic crises so that we can prevent austerity. Or the cutting of social and economic supports for low income and working people across New York State. Another question from John McFarland is, can the legislature raise taxes without Cuomo's approval? Override a veto, perhaps?
Another good question. So this is a political question. I mean, basically, the short answer is, technically speaking, yes, right? There's a Democratic supermajority right now, right? So let's say that in some ideal world, all of these bills get passed and we get the $50 billion, right? And we send it to Cuomo's desk and Cuomo's like, whoa, this is gonna make all my very rich friends very unhappy. I'm vetoing this. Technically, it can go back to the legislature and the Democrats have the 2/3 majority to overturn it. Now, will they all align and do something like that? That's another question because not all the Democratic politicians are on the same wavelength about we do need all this money and we need to pass this now. So that's why this campaign right now is so important because right now what we're doing is actually, on a daily basis, really meetings with legislatures, pressuring them to, 1, get on board with these 6 bills and then fight for them in the first place. And that's so that, hopefully we won't even have to get to a veto situation, but if it does, then they're going to be on board to begin with. So technically it's possible, but it's going to require a lot of political, fighting basically.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's
yeah.
The next part of this conversation is about the stuff that gets to that point. And actually Bobby from Buffalo's question was, how do we bring these pie charts and graph statistics to the appropriate representation or a representative person or entity? That's what Bobby's describing, lobbying. And so there's a lot of lobbying efforts that are going on. And so we are making sure that all of Albany's legislature, meaning the Assembly and the Senate, that all members have been provided this material. They have all been given meetings and had conversations. There's negotiations taking place. So that's the political fight. And Gabriel essentially answered that question. And and those kinds of things, we can help make sure that that stuff is happening. So I think, and another question was from Tatiana, is this for individuals or those filing as married? I think it was for the progressive income tax, perhaps, Tatiana?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep, that's right. For the chart that you showed on how much people would be taxed at their new income.
So the chart that I showed was for individuals, but basically if you double the numbers, it'll be the same tax rates for married filers. But yeah.
Thank you. Let's see.
And I could, by the way, I could if you don't have the slides, I'm happy to share this after the phone call.
I actually do have them, and I
Perfect.
realized I didn't run the first training we did, so I didn't realize that there were also some questions that we wanted to break it up in between. But I think this is also serving the same. Aren't there loopholes for the inheritance tax? I think I kind of answered that one already. Oh, this is Kelvin asked, is this why there was so much of an uproar around the GameStop episode recently when it comes to the rich? I forget exactly what part you were on, whenever, Kelvin, if you wanted to come on and say and ask your question again, if you still need it to be answered.
I'll pass. Thank you.
But the thing I would say is that, so we're talking about an inheritance tax for New York State that's new that we're trying to pass. I guess there may be inheritance taxes for the federal government. I don't really know.
Yeah.
So this is a new bill that targets homes that are worth more than $1 million. And it only gets that taxed. It only gets taxed if you decide to sell the home. So if like I own $1 million brownstone and I die and I leave it to my, hypothetical child, who most likely will be adopted because I'm like a gay person, hypothetical child, and they inherit my home, and they don't have to pay taxes immediately on that home from the inheritance tax. It's only if they decide, you know what, I actually don't want to live here anymore, I'm going to sell it to Carl. Then it's taxed. So if you're trying to keep wealth in the family, this tax, it's written with Black and brown and like low income or middle income people that end up owning property. It's designed specifically not to target them, so that we can continue to build wealth among low income people across New York State, especially for like a lot of Black folks, a lot of brown folks that have lived in New York State for decades and they own a home, like in Brooklyn. Just because all of a sudden Clinton Hill became a hot spot doesn't mean that they should be subject to, these increased taxes. Go ahead, Kelvin.
Yeah, I'm sorry, George. I just wanted to circle back on the GameStop. I think it was in reference to the slide that you referenced to the income gaining its own interest, like from the rich. And when I just correlated that with the stocks and how, when the GameStop came in, it felt like there was like Robinhood efforts to usurp that revenue.
Yeah, so there's like two things going on basically. So the GameStop episode is actually most closely related to the financial transactions tax. So, when all of those people that were involved in buying and selling the GameStop stocks, technically speaking, if they were in a financial transaction tax, every time they bought or sold it, they would have to pay a tiny, tiny, tiny fee on top of it. So that's like on the actual buying and selling it. Now, let's say that you were one of the hedge funds, and you happen to have, let's say you're one of the people who worked inside of the hedge funds, and you happen to have your own portfolio worth, millions of dollars of GameStop stock. Then what this other bill says, the mark to market, is that at the end of the year, let's say you had, let's say that it was January 1st, and you had $1 million worth of GameStop stock. And then at the end of the year, on December 31st, that same amount of GameStop stock was now not 1 million, it was $2 million. It had doubled in value. What the mark to market says is that, okay, you're going to pay, you basically made $1 million over that year. You have to pay a tax on that $1 million of earnings from that stock. And like I said, the way that most rich people make their money is not from a paycheck. It's actually just like that, where they have a bunch of stocks that gain value over time, and then they sell them, and then all that money comes back to them. So right now, it faces a very low tax rate, well below what someone would pay on a paycheck. And so we're fixing that by equalizing them, basically.
Sweet. And I'll get to Annette's question, which is what time frame are we looking at to see immediate change in progress? Well, Annette, one of the reasons why we're having these trainings so quickly and so rapidly and talking so much about this is because right now is the time for us to make this happen. We're in the middle of the budget and legislative session, well, the budget session, and the budget is due by April 1st. And the budget is going to be how the state determines how much money it has to fund whatever it needs to fund. All the things that you think about that you don't even think about, like the roads, maintenance, fire trucks, and all of that stuff, everything has to be addressed by April 1st. That's the New York State constitutional law. So the idea is that we make sure that these bills are in the budget so that we have, like, once the budget is voted on, all of a sudden these new tax policies become the law of the state, and we begin to start the process of generating all this revenue. But let's stall on the questions about the tax policies and their details, because I do again think that one of the tricks, the politics of corporate politicians is to get really complicated about policy. Whenever the policy is complicated, don't get me wrong, but the sentiments are simple. Either we tax people that have inordinate wealth, or the tax burden is on working and poor people overwhelmingly. We're trying to shift that. And because when we do that, then we're going to be able to improve the conditions and the economic and social supports of poor and working people. So I have another slide I want to show you. Wait, actually, let me answer. You want to answer Fred's question before we go on? It says New York City and New York State had a FTT from, I don't know what FTT is.
The financial transactions tax. Okay. Yeah. So yes, we did. The 1980, President Reagan came to power in 1980, and that signaled a major shift in the way financial regulation took place, right? And unfortunately, in New York, they fell victim to, New York's politics were not any different than Reagan's politics back then. And they removed the financial transactions tax, saying that it was distortion, there were problems with it and blah, 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 all the fake arguments. So actually right now, because technically that tax is already on the books, we're trying to just reintroduce what was already there. It makes our job easier.
Yeah, the one thing could I say about that, it's important to remember the history. Like, a lot of this started with, Reagan and Reaganomics, so-called Reaganomics, the trickle-down effect, which has been completely proven false. Absolutely. That if you unregulate massive wealth, that it somehow trickles into the pockets of people who are poor, and it clearly has never ever done that. It's it's like the same thing with philanthropy. It's like there's this myth that it's the super rich who give, to charity and give to community organizations. That's a lie. They are the smallest percentage of givers. It's working class people. It's poor folks who give the majority of philanthropic money to charities, to churches, to organizations like Vocal. It's like we're all kind of played by the financial industry. We're all kind of played by this lie that if you work hard and you're not taxed too hard, then you can really make something of yourself. And it's a fucking lie. It's crazy.
To that point, in 1972 in New York State, the richest people in the state paid 15% for their income taxes. Today, it's 8%. They got their tax rates cut in half over 40 years. And, the government now doesn't have any money. And their first thing to do is say, well, we can't afford anything. Well, why can't you afford anything? Because you cut taxes. That's how it works.
So thank you, Gabriel. And if you have to dip, I know we've gotten a lot of your time. It's okay.
All good. Happy to be here.
Okay, perfect. So I do want to teach folks a couple of things real quick that are really, really important. Because one of the things that is critical for vocal leaders to be able to understand is that this concept in communications that we call the pivot. Politicians are really good at the pivot. You ever been watching the news and then they ask the hard question, like, are you going to tax the rich to end homelessness? And then they say something like, well, what's really at stake is the fact that working people are being taxed too much. It's a trick where they easily change the subject. but we can do that too. So, and this is really important, and I think going to be really important for our campaigning around taxing the rich. So what's going to happen is we're going to be going wild outside of Governor Cuomo's office talking about we need to tax the rich in homelessness next week, right? And if a reporter comes, they're going to grab their microphone and they're going to say, hey, why are you out here asking to tax the rich? And then we're going to say, well, because we need to end homelessness. And we have a homelessness crisis, 94,000 people at least in shelters across the state. And it's unacceptable. And then they're going to say, well, aren't you afraid that, you know, the rich are going to leave the state? And then you're going to say, actually, that's not true, because there's data that shows us that the rich aren't going to leave. And then they're going to say, okay, well, tell me about the details of the policy. How much percentage is going to increase on the progressive income tax if I make $50,000? And then you're going to say, because you're not an economist, unless you are, and if you don't know, you don't need to know, because it doesn't really matter. What you say is, you know, I don't know that exactly, but what I do know is that 94,000 people are in shelters, and that's not okay in this state. You see what I'm saying? I pivot. So what I want to do right in this moment, and you see this cute picture of Joseph. This is one day when we were outside of a luxury, quote unquote, affordable housing building, where you had to make at least $100,000 to even qualify to apply for the apartment. I don't know how the hell that's affordable. So we had a direct action out there. And this picture, this drawing is a drawing of me from like a few years ago, whenever we had one of our HIV/AIDS legislative awareness days. But anyways, so let's play Ask a Leader. So a reporter is asking, why are you out here? Why do you want to tax the rich? So can we have a couple of volunteers who want to do this role-playing exercise? A leader, I mean.
I'll do it.
Okay, let's go ahead, Kip. So who wants to be our reporter?
I'll be the reporter.
Oh, you'll be the reporter. Okay, now we need a leader.
Oh.
Come on. This is the work, y'all. It's important. Should I just call on somebody? Okay, how about Annette? Annette, you are a person who's outside Governor Cuomo's office, and you're calling to tax the rich to end homelessness. And Kip is from CNN, and a hard-cutting reporter, and it's annoying outside, and you're like fired up, and now she's like, "Hi, I want to interview you." Go ahead, Kip. Start the interview.
Hi, my name is Kip. I'm from CNN. We're out here. What are you all talking about? Tax the rich. This is not really clear. I mean, didn't they really work hard for their money? This sounds
No, we
like
are furious out here
discrimination.
because we are furious out here because there are over 98,000 people that are homeless. Okay, they are suffering in shelters. The homelessness crisis is ridiculous. Okay, and it's a trickle effect because of such. Now, after we are fighting for affordable housing that they keep building, and they're not affordable for people that don't have accessible access to Wi-Fi in the shelters for the children. And so many different issues that we are discussing that needs to be addressed. Okay, and we're furious and we're tired of the nonsense that they constantly keep telling us that they're going to.
I'm sorry to interrupt, ma'am, but what does that have to do with people who worked really hard for their money? I mean, it sounds like you're being discriminatory against the rich.
No, we're not being discriminatory, okay? They actually got away with a lot of things over the years, okay? They constantly get money and they keep taxing their taxes that they get versus the persons that are making $50,000 and is actually in stat to where it's a ratio graph that can show you that 50% of the people that are making $50,000 are getting taxed the same way that people are getting $100,000, okay? And it's just not equal. It's just not fair. We're actually asking for some compassion, perhaps, as well. Have some empathy.
What is your name, ma'am?
My name is Mrs. Tomlin.
Mrs. Tomlin, do you have any numbers? You did give you gave 50,000 or something, but do you have any kind of like concrete numbers about like how much money that would be? Like, what does that mean?
Excuse me? Could you repeat the question?
What does that mean? And like, do you have numbers about what that means in terms of how you're going to tax? Like, how much money is that? To address the budget? I mean, the budget, there's no money.
There's no money. No, I would have to get back to you on that to be exact. Okay, that's what I would have to do. But I do know one thing. Okay, that they need to at least get consideration. It has to be some type of consideration. It's just unfair. We're asking to just be fair housed. That's the reason why we're taxing the rich.
Okay.
That could be over $51,000 to $75,000 estimated to be raised by enforcing these taxes.
Number?
hold on, pause. First of all,
Over 51 to $75,000 is estimated could be raised by taxing the rich in different areas.
Exactly.
And they would hardly feel it.
So
We're
what
talking about-
Malik's saying is exact. I mean, first of all, can we get a round of applause for Kip and Annette for a brilliant performance?
Thank you. 71.75, he said.
So no. So this is really critical point. This is what I want to get to. So Kip asked the right question. She went to the place where they might try to go, especially if they're from a conservative or from a moderate news station, which is why I said CNN and not Democracy Now! Right? So what Annette did everything right. She did the pivot, right? And all that Annette needed to do after you did that pivot, you needed to say, the Invest in Our New York Act bill package can generate $50 to $70 billion for New York State every year. The Invest in Our New York Act can generate $50 to $70 billion every year for New York State.
Gotcha.
That's all you gotta say. And then it's like, hey, if you want to see the breakdown of those facts, here's the website. If you want to see the breakdown of those facts, talk to that person. You want to see the breakdown of those facts, here's a folder, and so that kind of thing. And I will never, ever, ever, as your organizer, put you in a situation where you didn't have that in your back pocket. See what I'm saying?
I got used to that when we got to lobbying, and sometimes it was just a matter of actually getting the information prior to. So that was definitely important. But you want to know exactly what you're going out there to represent and be well informed.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I want to get a couple more volunteers, but I think to your point, Annette, it's important that you know what you're talking about. But remember this concept I always tell you about. It's called experiential authority. Lean on the things that you've experienced. If you're a person living with HIV, if you're a person that's experienced homelessness, if you're a person that's been to prison, if you're a person that's used drugs or used to use drugs or using drugs today and have been affected by bad policy, lean on that and say, hey, the Invest in Our New York Act can generate $50 to $70 billion every year for New York State. And one of the reasons that people told me I experienced homelessness was because there was no money to support me. That's what we're trying to address here. Because that will always, listen to me, and it's not a game. That will always be more powerful than, oh, I went to MIT, I studied economics for 15 years. That is meaningful, it's important, but that is not the experience because math is hard for people, first of all. That's why Gabriel's here to talk about the policy. I couldn't do it the way that Gabriel did it. But what I can do is name, how my experiences have been, crafted by the negligence of the state. The state didn't have enough stock of affordable housing, therefore I couldn't find housing. So let's actually hear a couple of more.
Can I say something, Jawanza?
Yeah, go ahead, Pedro.
I love that. I love what Kip came to tell her. If I was in that situation, I would have said, "I'm not talking about you and I. We're not the 1%. I'm talking about people that make 300,000 and above. New York State had the most millionaires in the nation. Why can't they pay their portion?" Now you answer that question. I think everybody need to remember we had the most amount of millionaires in one state. That is a telltale sign.
Right.
Should they pay their portion?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, that's oh my God, Pedro, that is a perfect contribution to this conversation, because sometimes people really in this weird fallacy way believe that we're talking about them. When we're talking about taxing extreme wealth, they get afraid because the politic class, they've convinced the vast majority of Americans or people that live in this country that somehow we're all going to be billionaires. Whenever Gabriel just illustrated that the number of people that are able to amass this amount of wealth is going to be always going down, not up, because the way it functions, it's a basic logic question. So is it illogical to think that somehow we're talking about, the vast majority of people when we're talking about the 1%? So because the 1% aren't news reporters.
Where the money resides, where the money resides.
Let's hear from two more volunteers. We need one reporter and we need one leader who wants to talk about an issue from their perspective. Come on, volunteer, please. Okay, how about we have Kelvin, be a person working to end, overdose or homelessness in Rochester. And then we have, let's say, who wants to be a reporter?
Well, I would like to be the one interviewed.
Okay, you want to be interviewed? Okay, how about Kelvin, you be the reporter and Malik be interviewed?
Why I gotta be me all the time? Step up, folks. Go ahead.
So I'll be the reporter. Okay, so why are you out here and why do you want to tax the rich?
Because it's time that we talk about diversity. It's time we have, and we talk about equality. So we just want equality in taxes.
Okay, I'm not sure where to go from there, to be
No,
honest.
Kelvin, you got to just use the power of your imagination. You are a cutthroat reporter. You're there to make sure that your friends, your stock package holding friends are not going to be taken advantage of by these crazy liberals, these crazy leftists asking to tax the rich out of existence. You need to get to the point. Are you trying to destroy this country? Be like that, because that's what we might encounter.
Just put yourself as being a millionaire, if you can.
Maybe that's the problem. Okay. No, but sir, I mean, don't we have like safety systems set up to take care of that already? I mean,
And like I said, yes, we have a system, and it's imbalanced. The system is imbalanced. In New York State, we have the richest people in the world living in New York State and paying. They have taxes that they haven't even been taxed on yet, like the trading, the mark trading. There are many areas we can tax them where they don't even feel it.
sir, but what about the people that go to work every day? I'm trying to understand, like, there's so many people that populate this city, this state. Why can't more money be generated from these people?
And see, that's the problem. They're using the same old tactics of budget cuts. And who are they going to be affected by these budget cuts? The people that are already paying the bulk of the taxes, the very people you're talking about. And let's remind the people that the corporations have been getting welfare all their corporate lives, just like we have. But that it hasn't been imbalanced, as I said before. It's time for them to pay more so that we can solve these issues that Vocal and most of the community are concerned about: homelessness, the drug epidemic, HIV/AIDS, and others. And fair housing, a real affordable housing. These are the things that Vocal are trying to battle, and we are battling. And there's money to pay for these issues without, taxing the peoples.
And scene. So really good, really good stuff. I do want to do one more. So I really want Gabriel to be the reporter and I'll be the leader.
Can I ask a question?
Wait, okay, Carl first and then we'll do that.
This is to Gabriel. I want to know why we not fighting for, if they don't want to give us the tax to the rich, why they not fighting for our Robin Hood taxes, $360 billion?
So, Carl, the reason the Robin Hood tax fight is a different campaign. This is the Invest in Our New York campaign. It doesn't mean that the Robin Hood fight, I don't know all the details about the history of that fight because that's like a little bit before my time as a campaigner at Vocal. But this training is specifically about the Invest in Our New York package. It doesn't mean that it's the only taxes that we should be advocating for, but there's a big coalition of people that are advancing these particular policies under this particular umbrella in this particular time. It doesn't mean that everything else is canceled out. It's just that we're talking about these, not that the other ones aren't important.
Okay.
So let's just do one quick, because I feel like you could ask the questions that they would probably ask, and I'll try to respond in a way that I think leaders should respond. Because another thing is, I think another trick or trap is for us to get asked about the specific policies, and we need to be able to pivot back to, well, this is a package of bills. All you need to know is Invest in New York raises $50 to $70 billion to end homelessness and mass incarceration, drug war, and AIDS for us from Vocal's perspective. But okay, and action.
So Joanza, tell me why you're out here. Why do you want to tax the rich? Don't they already pay enough in taxes?
Hey, I really appreciate you being out here to cover this situation. We are in a crisis moment in New York State history. We have COVID-19 rates that are out of skyrocketing. We've got mass death. We've got incredible homelessness. We're out here because we know that the state is ready to cut our services. They have cut our services all across the state. Drug syringe access programs have all faced massive cuts. We're out here to say we need to raise the revenue to fund the things that working New Yorkers need, that poor New Yorkers need, and we need to tax the rich to make it happen.
I totally agree with that, but I don't you think that the rich are going to leave if you tax them?
Hey, one thing I always say is that we in New York State, the people, the working people, we made it possible for these folks to be able to build this kind of wealth. For them to leave would be so disrespectful, and it shows you exactly who they are. But one thing though, Gabriel, the reality is that that's just a hollow threat that billionaires make. Because at the end of the day, we've seen time and time again, every time we need to raise taxes on the rich in New York State, they actually don't leave. They continue to move into the state because we produce wealth in this state. They would be stupid to leave.
That's good.
Yes, they
would.
would.
One thing I always like to add to the, if you tax the rich away, will they leave? If we cut, remember, you only have two choices. You can cut the budget or you can tax the rich. If you cut the budget and you make life worse for the bottom 99%, okay, maybe the rich won't leave, but the poor are. Like they're gonna do what they need to survive, right? Like if they have to leave, if things are so bad that they have to leave to find a better school or a place to live or a job to work in, they're gonna leave the state. So it's not just about the rich leaving. Like we don't want New Yorkers to leave either.
That's brilliant, Gabriel. I will always use it now because the reality is I know so many New Yorkers who are moving to Georgia. And I'm just like, why is it?
No, it's not a joke.
It's too expensive. So that's a perfect pivot. Hey, I don't know if billionaires are going to leave because they have houses all over the country, but I know one thing, low income and working New Yorkers have been leaving in mass to southern states because they can't afford the housing here because homelessness is out of control. But that could be tricky too because they can try to trap you and they say something like, oh, because the taxes are too high. That's why they're leaving. So our tax policies target the 1%. They target millionaires and billionaires. This does not target working people, middle income people. The vast majority of New Yorkers will be unaffected by these policies in a negative way. In fact, the vast majority of New Yorkers would benefit if we pass these policies because all of a sudden we're going to be able to invest in our communities that have been devastated economically, socially, and physically by COVID-19, and also runaway inequality by the billionaire class.
And as a billionaire, millionaire, my question is, what if I move my trading offshore or move out of state? Or I'm not worried about them moving out of state. I'm more concerned about you, as you said, me moving out of state, the people who are on the lower range. That's what I'm concerned about. My question also is, you're going to tax us now. That means you'll be coming back for later for another tax. And also, there'll be other entities who have other concerns about the community who want to tax the rich and to take care of those problems in the world. I see it as an open floodgate to tax the rich from all directions.
So thank you for that. And let's end this.
If you understand the question.
But let's actually end this scene because I do want to get to the last thing, which is like actual action steps we can take right now. But a thing I want to also teach folks and to think about, I always think about, setting the stage. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you talking? Setting your authority up. Hey, my name's Jawanza. I've experienced homelessness, and I'm an organizer at Vocal New York, which organizes with hundreds of people that are low income across New York State. And so that's my authority. That's why you should listen to me. And then I only say what I know. And then when they try to trick me, if I don't know the answer, I pivot and say what I do know, and then I dismount. Dismount is important too. Like, how am I gonna end this conversation with me in power? Like, you don't want to let them keep asking you questions where they're trying to confuse you. Like, hey, I got to get back to this work that I'm doing right now. But if we don't tax the rich, the poor will absolutely suffer. And when the poor suffer, it hurts all of us. And New York State has an obligation to all of its people, not just to a handful of billionaires. And then I walk away. And no matter what they say, I walk away. Or I tell them, oh, I'm actually done with the interview. Because you can do that. Remember, they are at work just like you are in this movement, and you don't have to talk to anybody you don't want to, and you don't have to answer any question you don't want to. I don't know the answer to that question, or even I don't feel comfortable answering that question. Kick rocks. But anyways, that was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful examples of like sort of what it will look like. And we'll get better at this. We'll keep doing this. And just as you walk away from this meeting, think a lot about the work that you're doing in your respective unions or chapters on their respective issues. And like, how would I describe to somebody why me as a person that's a former drug user, or me as a person that's formerly homeless, or me as a person that's formerly incarcerated, or me as a person living with HIV, like, how do I talk about the things that I know my community needs in the context of taxes? So whatever the thing that costs money, because believe me, to end these crises, it costs a lot of money. And the reason that these crises exist at the degree that they exist is because some people made a whole bunch of money by creating the conditions of this crisis that we're in right now. The billionaire class, overwhelmingly, they create the conditions for this kind of poverty, abject poverty, for this kind of wealth inequality. So we are trying to correct the scales, trying to balance the scales. And this is the political fight that we're in. This is the ideological fight that we're in. And we just got to be crystal clear and unencumbered by problematic ideas from those who are moderate and those who are on the right. So next week, this is a big deal. So if I definitely sent you an email about this already, but this is a really big week for us in our fight to tax the rich in New York State. So we have a week of action to end overdose and homelessness. And can somebody volunteer to read the things on the screen? Leader.
I will.
Go ahead.
February 8th, week of action to end overdose and homelessness. February 8th, text banking to text the rich, 6 to 8:30 p.m.
Right.
February 10th.
Actually pause, Pedro. After each one, I'm gonna say something. So Pedro said that on February 9th, text banking to tax the rich, 6 to 8:30 p.m. We're gonna have our Grow team and Fred leading that work. So what we want to do is get members and leaders into a Zoom room, and we're gonna use this program called Spoke, which is a mass text tool to get people out in the world to target elected officials about demanding them to tax the rich. It's really fun. We're working with our network organization called People's Action to have like a DJ. So it won't just be, doing the work. It'll also be having a good time and building a community with people. Go ahead, Pedro.
February 10th, statewide membership assembly with elected officials from 5 to 6:30 p.m.
This is critical. Listen to me. Our statewide membership assembly, oftentimes we're holding that meeting and we're just keeping each other up to date, building connections and relationships across the unions and across the chapters, across the state, right? So, but the real purpose of it is for us to be able to amass a number of people to demonstrate our collective power as an organization, as a movement of people. So next week, though, is uniquely important because we're going to have elected officials invited to this space, and we're going to articulate to them our issues, our priorities, especially around overdose and homelessness from the perspective of tax the rich. So we're going to get them on the record of what their ideas are, what their opinions are about the stuff that we're talking about today. So it was really important for people to be at this meeting, again, to get that stuff refreshed in your brain so that next week, whenever these elected officials are there, you can be listening with even more informed ears. Pedro?
February 11th at 1 p.m., direct action on Cuomo in New York City, Western New York, and Albany, all at one time.
Yep, super duper excited about this. We love a statewide direct action. That's what this is gonna be next week. So in New York City, we're gonna go to 3rd Avenue, near Grand Central or Central Station, whatever, Grand Central, whatever, the big pretty station. And outside of his office in Manhattan on 3rd Avenue. And in Western New York, there's going to be either an action both in Rochester and Buffalo at 1 p.m. or just Buffalo. We're still working that part out. And in Albany, we're going to have another direct action, all of them targeting Governor Cuomo at his respective his offices in Western New York, in New York City, and in Albany at the governor's mansion. So the whole point is for us to bring that fire and urgency to the governor so that he can't say that we aren't calling the tax the rich to end homelessness, to end the overdose crisis, which we have seen. And I don't know if Jasmine's here to even just mention the degree of overdose crisis. Like, I don't even know if we know the exact numbers right now because of all the ways in which services and other supports that people who use drugs need across the state being interrupted by supposedly COVID-19 related economic catastrophe. Biz, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, or Jasmine. I thought I saw Jasmine coming here. But
yeah, I mean, I think you summarized it pretty well. You know, harm reduction services are, even before COVID, definitely something that always gets the bottom of the barrel when it comes to funding. And so it's really no surprise that Governor Cuomo had no problem with cutting millions of dollars in service providers, specifically again with harm reduction. And it has resulted in a syringe shortage across the state, which then has resulted in HIV and Hep C rates going up across the state. And it also impacts overdose. But yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Biz. I'm not.
And then, oh, sorry. The only one, sorry, I'm here. The one thing that I would add is, you know, overdose has been on an exponential arch or line. I can't think of the word right now. Increasing for 30 years, right? And now we're in 2020. The CDC is saying, hey, 2020 is going to be the worst year on record. They, you know, are predicting that across the nation, 100,000 people will have died last year, which is the worst that has ever happened. And then what we know in New York State is that they're also saying that in New York State, the overdose crisis will be record high in 2020. We're seeing the numbers trickle out of counties as well as New York City, that in the first 2 quarters of New York City, over 800 people died last year. And so that is like where we're at on the overdose crisis. And it, as Biz is saying, it's been exacerbated by Governor Cuomo blocking and like refusing to implement life-saving services and then decimating programs during a critical time when the need was higher than ever.
I mean, horrifying stuff to really be sort of closing the meeting out on. But I will share, I've already emailed all of you that the signups for all of those events I mentioned. So I guess, you know, we haven't even begun to see the total like impact of what 2020 has done to our people all across this country. And I'm getting a little bit emotional thinking about it because we won't know for some time. And, you know, first, I just want to say thank you to the Democratic Socialists of America and the Debt and Finance Working Group, and Gabriel in particular for getting on here today and, like, you know, having this conversation with us. And of course, all the leaders and members that are here and staff, really, really important. I just want to remind us all that this is not a new fight for us. We've been calling to tax the rich for 20 years as an organization. We've been calling to defund the police for many years, especially the Users Union has been doing that. We just didn't call it defund. We would say take money from the cops and put it into the hands of harm reduction service providers. This is the kind of stuff that we need to have the whole state of New York to understand. And let me tell you, we are in the fight of our lifetimes. I promise you that much. I promise you that what we do right now in New York State is going to affect us, our families, our friends for time, probably immemorial, because what we're seeing right now is the thriving of a virus that has created economic catastrophe to, you know, on top of the already systematized catastrophe of wealth inequality, of racialized capitalism. These are very real phenomena. And we have to respond to this stuff. And we can't depend on the corporate parties, the Democrats, the Republicans, and the moderate Democrats. You know, we got some people in these parties that are good, but what's gonna matter for us is policy. What's gonna matter for us is our ability to build powerful institutions that can hold the government accountable, and the only way that we can do that is if we build deep meaningful, legitimate leadership of people that are directly impacted by all of these crises, because it is our voices, it is your voices, it is your experiences that give you authority, expertise, and it is us that will inherit the fruit of our work. It is our family, it is our friends, and ultimately it is all people, even the billionaires. It's a good thing to live in a world where people are taken care of. And we are the caretakers of humanity in this sense. Not that we're the greatest, we are simply a part of a massive constellation of people who are committed to realizing the true possibilities of what it means to be human beings, engage in collective action, and engage in civilization. And, you know, fuck billionaires. And I said this like 4 years ago at one of our first Albany can End Homelessness town halls. And somebody asked, well, what if the billionaires leave? Because Governor Cuomo kept saying it. And I was like, you know what? If the billionaires leave, well, get the fuck out. We can live without them. They only exist because of us collectively. So with that, let's go into the next week with all of our stories, with all of the people that are suffering across this world, those who are here still and those who are gone. And in their names, let us demand that the state of New York taxes the rich to end overdose and to end homelessness. Have a wonderful night, y'all.
Thank you, JW. Don't forget the slide deck, my brother.
Thank you.
I won't.
Thank you, Dad.
Take care, y'all.
All right, family.
H1 to spell that experimental.
Carlo, I'm gonna give you a call.
Experiential.
Authority.
Authority. I got it right. Experiential.
Yeah.
Yo,
All right.
Hey, Luke.
All right.
What up, big
yo,
Luke?
What's up, John?
Hey, Carl.
Yo, we going to the governor's office, okay?